If you've ever wondered what someone thinks about when time is running out, this story is for you. Not to scare you, not to depress you, but to slow you down, just long enough to remember what's real. Because the end doesn't arrive with a warning. It comes gently, sometimes unnoticed, sometimes with silence louder than any storm. We all think we'll have more time to say the thing, to fix the rift, to hold their hand just once more. But no one ever tells you that most goodbyes aren't spoken. They happen in the stillness, in empty rooms, in the soft click of a door that doesn't open again. I want to ask you something, and I hope you'll take it seriously. If you knew you had just a few weeks left to live, what would you hope people remember about you? Not the job, not the title, not the image you curated, but the you that came alive in quiet moments. The version of you who showed up when no one was watching. The part of you that loved deeply and meant it. If anything rises up while you're listening, a thought, a name, a sentence you wish you'd said to someone, don't keep it in. You can share it in the comments below. Sometimes your truth is someone else's reminder that it's not too late. Because today, I want to tell you a story, a true story, about a woman named Margaret, about the final days of her life, and about what truly matters when everything else has fallen away. Her name was Margaret, 88 years old, still sharp, but her body had begun to fade, like a once bold painting left too long in the sun. She had soft silver hair that she insisted on brushing herself each morning. A gold wedding band she still wore, even though he'd been gone for over a decade. And eyes that didn't just see, they remembered. The first time I met her, she was sitting upright in bed, wrapped in a knitted shawl the color of ash and rose. The room smelled faintly of lavender, but beneath it lingered something else. The unmistakable stillness of a place where people come to say goodbye. On the nightstand sat a chipped ceramic cup, steam curling from it like smoke from an old memory. Beside it, an old photo frame. A younger Margaret, barefoot, laughing, caught mid-spin on a grassy hill. And next to her, a man with warm eyes and wind-tossed hair, holding her hand like it was the only anchor he needed in the world. They looked unbreakable, but the photo was cracked, a fine line through both faces, like time had tried to erase them, but hadn't quite succeeded. When I entered the room, Margaret turned her head slowly, her voice, raspy but certain, cut through the silence. "Are you here to talk to me, or just to look like you're doing something useful?" It wasn't cruel, it was clear. I smiled, put my clipboard down, and said, "I'm here to sit with you, if you'll let me." She studied me for a moment, then looked out the window. "There's a bluebird that comes every morning at 9:17. He's late today. Must be Sunday." That was the first thing I learned about Margaret. She never filled silence unless it meant something. And she never wasted a sentence on anything she didn't feel. I glanced at the photo on the table. Margaret caught me looking. "That one?" she said. "That was taken the summer I stopped waiting for permission to be happy." She smiled at the memory. "I was 23. It had just rained, and the field behind my parents' house turned into a sea of gold and puddles. I kicked off my shoes, ran outside, and just danced. She chuckled softly. My brother snapped the picture. He said I looked like a girl who finally realized the world didn't need to clap for her to be free. Her voice got quieter. I kept that photo with me everywhere I moved, because that moment, it wasn't about youth, it was about choice, about remembering that even after heartbreak, even after disappointment, joy was still mine to reach for. She looked out the window then. That girl in the photo, she's still in here somewhere, just slower now, a little softer, but still barefoot in spirit. You remind me of someone, Margaret said the second time I visited her. She didn't say who, not at first. She just looked at me like she was peering backward through time. I asked gently, "Someone important?" She tilted her head. "The most." Later that afternoon, she told me his name. "Walter," she said. "Wore glasses he always lost. Worked in a bookstore that smelled like cinnamon dust." She smiled, as if the scent had returned for a moment. "He used to write me poems on the backs of old receipts. Little things, silly things. Once he rhymed Margaret with starlet. It was terrible." We both laughed. The kind of laugh you only hear in rooms where grief has been living quietly. "He knew I hated coffee," she continued. "But every Thursday he brought me one. Black, 2 sugars, and I drank it anyway." She looked down at her lap. "He remembered how I liked it. That was enough." I asked what happened. Margaret didn't answer right away. She reached for the photo frame. "I wanted more," she said. "More than bookstores and poems. I wanted the world to see me. I thought success meant being seen from far away, not being known up close." She turned the photo over. "I chose ambition, and I got it." A pause. A long one. "But I never found another Walter." I asked, "Did you ever write to him?" She shook her head. "No, because I was afraid he'd moved on." She exhaled slowly, like letting go of something that had clung to her ribs for 60 years. "No one tells you," she said, "that some people only pass through once." Then she looked up and whispered, "And when they do, they take part of you with them." We sat in silence after that. Not the awkward kind, the kind that feels sacred. Hospice rooms don't ask for conversation. They invite something slower, more honest. The air felt thick, like it remembered things too. I glanced at the photo again, and I could almost hear it. The sound of a door chime in that bookstore, the scratch of his pen, the hum of a girl pretending not to fall in love. Then she broke the stillness. "Do you know what I regret the most?" She didn't wait for an answer. "It's not the people I lost. It's the ones I made feel small, because I thought chasing bigger was more important than being present." I felt that in my chest, still do. She went on. "I had a friend once, Nadine. She was the kind who remembered your birthday without needing a calendar, who brought soup when you didn't ask, and who listened without trying to fix anything." Margaret looked away. "I pushed her out of my life, because I thought she made me look too ordinary." Her voice cracked a little then, not loud, but enough. "We measure so many wrong things," she said softly. "Attention, applause, accomplishments. But in the end, none of that holds your hand when the night is long." Then she looked at me. "Are you in love?" I told her no, not really, not yet. She nodded. "Good. Don't rush it. And don't fake it. She leaned back into the pillow. Just promise me one thing, she said. When it comes, don't run from it because it's quiet. Sometimes the quiet ones are the real ones. I asked her, what would you say to someone young, someone like me, who's scared they'll get it all wrong? She thought for a moment. Then she said, tell the truth. Say the hard thing. And don't wait until your body is giving out to start living from the heart. I visited Margaret 4 more times, not because I was assigned to, but because some stories pull you back before you even realize you've stood up to leave. Each time I returned, she seemed smaller, but somehow the room felt fuller. We talked about ordinary things. Pears, postcards, a radio song she couldn't remember the name of, but swore she once danced to on a balcony in Paris. That story was new. Paris? I asked, surprised. She smirked. I was 20, wore red lipstick and lied about my age to rent a room. He was Italian. He taught me to say ti amo and mean it. She paused. But I didn't stay, because I thought there would be more adventures. Then she added, there were, but none of them felt like dancing on a balcony with someone who looked at me like I was made of starlight. That was the 3rd visit. The 4th was quieter. We sat and listened to the hum of the old radiator and the sound of rain tapping on the glass. She didn't say much, but she hummed, the same tune her mother used to sing while folding laundry. That's how I knew she was starting to drift. Not in fear, but toward memory. On our final visit, she didn't speak at all. Her fingers found mine and held on. Her eyes searched my face like she was making a final sketch, not of my features, but of the feeling I gave her. We sat like that until the sky outside turned a deep pink. She passed 2 days later. No obituary, no funeral, just a quiet note in the hospice logbook. But she left something with me. A warmth, a truth, a story I couldn't forget, not even if I tried. And now, she leaves it with you. There was another woman down the hall, Elaine. She was in hospice too. Didn't talk much, didn't get many visitors. But Margaret always noticed her. There's a silence around her, she once said, that feels heavier than mine. On one of my visits, Margaret asked if we could bring an extra flower to Elaine's room. Not for decoration, she said, but so she knows she hasn't disappeared. So we did. A small lily in a chipped glass. Elaine didn't say anything, just nodded once, eyes glossy. Margaret later told me, sometimes kindness is the only language left when words are gone. It stuck with me, because even near the end, she wasn't thinking only of herself. She still had space for someone else's loneliness. When Margaret passed, I walked past Elaine's room one last time. The lily was still there, still alive. Margaret never made the news, didn't have a building named after her. She didn't leave behind an inheritance, or a grand legacy, but she left a fingerprint on the heart of a stranger. And that is enough. Because what matters in the end isn't how loudly the world applauded you. It's whether you lived in such a way that someone still hears your voice long after you're gone. You see, we all carry stories. Some we tell, some we hide, and some are whispered into the quiet moments of someone else's life and stay there forever. That's what Margaret gave me, a reminder that legacy isn't measured in years, but in presence. So now, I want to ask you one more time. What story are you leaving behind? And more than that, who do you need to tell it to while you still can? If someone comes to mind, a name, a face, a person you haven't spoken to in too long, reach out, send the message, write the letter. And if someone has already passed, say their name here. Write it in the comments, not just so they're remembered, but so someone else knows they're not the only one who carries a memory like a folded note in their pocket. And if this story meant something to you, subscribe to this channel, not for numbers, but because we're building a place where stories are sacred, where wisdom is shared, where you, yes, you, are seen. So come sit with us again tomorrow night. We'll keep the light on for you. There was one story Margaret hadn't shared, not with her sister, not with her nurse, not even with the man who once said he'd never love anyone else. She told it to me on a morning when her hands were especially cold. I had brought her tea. She didn't drink it, but she looked at me and said, "Have I ever told you about the time I almost stayed?" I sat down. She didn't wait for permission. I was 34, in Vienna. I had just spoken at a women's conference on leadership and independence. She smiled. I wore a pale blue suit and heels that blistered both feet. But I stood tall. I was proud. Her eyes glazed slightly, as if the memory were being replayed on the ceiling. That night, they invited us to a small bar, nothing fancy. And there he was, a violinist, solo. Thin smile, tired eyes. But when he played, the whole room leaned in. She paused, as if hearing the music again. He had a name I still can't pronounce, but he had a laugh like he'd known sorrow and made peace with it. They spoke for 3 hours, about books, faith, the kind of silence you only find in cathedrals. He asked me to stay, just for a week, to listen to his music, to learn what stillness meant. I asked her, "Did you?" She shook her head. I told him I had a flight, a purpose, an obligation. A long pause. But I've thought of him every April since. Then she looked at me and whispered, "Isn't it strange how the almosts leave the deepest mark?" 2 days after Margaret passed, the hospice nurse gave me a small envelope. It was tucked inside the drawer of the nightstand she never let anyone open. On the outside, in fragile cursive, was a name I already knew. Walter. The seal had never been broken. Inside, just a single page, yellowed at the edges, smelling faintly of rose water and old paper. I shouldn't have read it. But the nurse said she'd want you to. And I believe she would have. The letter began. "Dear Walter, if this ever finds you, it means I never found the courage to send it myself. I've spent years trying to forget the sound of your voice. And failing. You loved me with such patience. And I left you in search of something louder. I wish I had known the quiet kind of love is the kind that stays. I still make tea the way you liked it. I still hum that song you used to sing in the car when you thought I wasn't listening. I thought time would make me wise. It only made me honest. And honestly, you were the best thing I never chose." It ended there. No sign-off. No date. Just a piece of a heart folded into paper and left waiting in a drawer no one ever opened. Until it was too late. I held that letter for a long time. And I wondered How many of us are still holding words like that? Unspoken truths, unsent apologies, goodbyes we never gave because we told ourselves there'd be time. One night, near the end, I couldn't sleep. Something just felt unfinished. So I went back. It was almost midnight. The halls were dim, the air quieter than usual, as if even the building knew time was running thin. Margaret was still awake, barely, eyes half open, voice dry as parchment. "You came back," she whispered. "I didn't say everything I wanted to," I admitted. She smiled faintly. "None of us ever do." I pulled up the chair, held her hand, and asked, "Are you afraid?" Her answer surprised me. "Not of leaving," she said. "I'm afraid of being remembered only for how I died, not for how I lived." She closed her eyes, but her hand tightened slightly. "Promise me something," she whispered. "Tell someone I mattered, even if they never met me." "I promise," I said. She didn't speak again that night, but her breathing slowed, calmed, like a tide finally coming home. I've thought about Margaret every day since, not because her story was dramatic, but because it was real, quiet, unadorned, true. And I've come to believe something I never would have said before I met her. The biggest regrets aren't about what we did. They're about what we waited too long to say. You can carry a missed goodbye like a stone in your chest for decades. You can forget birthdays, but remember the silence that followed an unanswered letter for the rest of your life. There's a myth that time makes things easier. But Margaret taught me, time doesn't erase, it just buries. And what we bury, we still carry. So if you're watching this, and there's someone you haven't spoken to in years, someone who used to make your coffee just right, or make you laugh so hard you had to sit down, send the message. Don't write the letter and hide it in a drawer. Say the thing before your voice becomes a memory, because one day you'll be 88, or maybe not, and someone will sit beside your bed and wonder who you still dream about when your eyes are closed and your hand is reaching for something that isn't there. And I hope when that moment comes, there's nothing left you wish you had said. Margaret is gone, Walter is too, but their story isn't. Because now you've heard it, and that means it lives on, in you, in the quiet echo it leaves behind. We don't get to choose how long we're here, but we do get to choose how deeply we show up while we are. So let this be your reminder to forgive when it's hard, to love even when it's quiet, to make memories worth aching for someday. And when the end comes, as it will, may it find you empty of regrets, but full of moments. Moments you were truly in. Moments you didn't run from. Moments that mattered. If this story touched you, leave a name in the comments, someone you loved, someone you lost, someone you wish you'd said more to. And if you're new here, subscribe, not for numbers, but to be part of something quiet and real, a place where stories breathe and where every life, even the unseen ones, finds a place to rest. Come sit with us again tomorrow night. We'll be here, still listening, still remembering. A few days later, a nurse handed me a small envelope. There was a note on her chart, she said. She wanted you to have this. Inside was a folded piece of stationery, delicate, yellowed around the edges, and tucked within it, a pressed wildflower, a daisy. On the paper, just one sentence was written in a shaky hand. "Thank you for seeing the parts of me that time almost erased." That was Margaret. No grand speeches, no final sermons, just quiet truth and one last moment of presence. I still have that daisy, kept between two glass panes on my bookshelf, not for display, but as a reminder that even at the edge of life, someone can leave you with something that blooms forever. A week after Margaret passed, I found myself walking past the same bookstore she had once mentioned. Out of curiosity, I stepped inside. It was small, timeless, with shelves that seemed to whisper. I found an old poetry section, dusty, but still loved. And tucked between two forgotten volumes was a receipt. Faded ink, barely legible. But the last line stopped me cold. I loved her in silence and hoped one day she'd return. No name, no date, just a coffee stain in the corner, but I knew it had to be his. Walter. I bought both books. Didn't matter what they were. Took them home and placed the receipt inside the same frame that held the daisy. Later that evening, I wrote Margaret's name inside the cover of one of the books. A silent acknowledgement, a full circle, not for the world, just for her. Sometimes I wonder, had she walked into that shop just once more, would she have found it? Would she have known that love quietly lingered, even in the places she thought she'd left behind? But maybe it's better this way. Unfinished stories often carry the most weight, and maybe they carry us forward too.